The silk lining came apart easier than I expected. I've been meaning to reg-loo the inside cover of our wedding album for 2 years, ever since it started peeling at the corner, and it was only because my daughter Emma was moving boxes out of the hall closet on Sycamore Street that I even pulled it down again. That's when I felt it. A hard rectangle, wrapped in a plastic sandwich bag, tucked flat against the cardboard backing like it had been slid there on purpose. A phone. Old. A flip phone. The kind you'd buy with cash at a gas station. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. I told myself it was nothing, some forgotten gadget from years ago, maybe even mine. Then the screen lit up on its own. 1 bar of battery. 1 new message. Did he find it yet? Sent 4 days ago. My wife Laura had been gone for 3 years. I sat down hard on the closet floor, that little screen glowing in my palm like it belonged to a stranger because in that moment, it felt like it did. Laura died in a boating accident on Lake Julian in October of 2021. There was a search. There was a funeral with no body in the casket. There was a folded flag of a life I thought I understood completely. If you've ever held something in your hands that rewrites everything you thought you knew, you understand why I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at 4 words from someone signing off as wondering who had been texting a phone that belonged to a dead woman. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened next, because it took me down a road I never saw coming. And if you're the kind of person who believes the truth always finds its way home eventually, stick with me to the end. This one earns it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with that phone plugged into a charger I found in a drawer, watching the battery icon climb, waiting to see if would text again. My name is Daniel Whitfield. I'm 58 years old, and I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina my whole life, in the same rambling blue house on Sycamore Street that Laura and I bought back in 1994, back when the neighborhood was still half farmland. Laura Whitfield was the most careful person I ever knew. Not cautious in a fearful way. Careful in the way of someone who noticed everything. She remembered which of Emma's teachers liked coffee versus tea. She kept a running list in a little notebook by the phone of everyone's birthdays going back 3 generations. She ran the books for a landscaping company downtown for over 20 years and never once had them off by a penny. We had one daughter, Emma, who was 26 the year her mother died and is 29 now. We had a good life, not a flashy one. Camping trips to the Blue Ridge Parkway, Sunday dinners, 27 years of marriage that had its dry patches like any marriage does, but never anything I'd call trouble. Except, looking back now, there were things, small things I explained away at the time. In the last year of her life, Laura started taking longer walks alone, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2, always saying she needed the air. She got a P.O. box downtown that she said was for a surprise she was planning for Emma's engagement. Emma wasn't even seeing anyone seriously yet. Twice I picked up our landline and heard a click like someone had just hung up on the other end. I never confronted her about any of it. I trusted my wife. That trust wasn't naive. It was 27 years earned, which is exactly why, 3 years after burying an empty casket, sitting there with a stranger's message on a phone hidden in our wedding album, I felt something crack open in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. I called Emma that morning. My voice must have sounded strange, because she was at my door in 20 minutes flat, still in her work clothes, asking what was wrong. Emma held the phone like it might go off in her hand. She read out loud. Mom didn't know anyone whose name started with M that we'd hide a phone number for. Your Aunt Michelle, I said, grasping. Aunt Michelle texts in full sentences with 3 exclamation points. Dad, this isn't her. We went through the phone together at the kitchen table, the same table where Laura used to grade Emma's spelling tests. There were only 11 messages total, spread out over 3 years, each one from the same contact, saved simply as a... Most were short, cryptic. Package moved. Confirm receipt. He's asking questions again. Stay quiet a while longer. Anniversary is hard. I know. Stay strong. That last one had been sent on our wedding anniversary, October the 14th, the year after Laura died. My stomach turned over. Someone out there was marking our anniversary, like it meant something to them personally, and doing it while addressing whoever held this phone with tenderness, like comfort between people who understood each other's grief. Dad, Emma said quietly, What if this isn't about mom hiding something from you? What if somebody's been using her phone? What if somebody's pretending? I wanted that to be true so badly, I almost let myself believe it right there. But phones don't hide themselves inside silk lining. Someone put that phone in that album, sealed it in plastic like they meant to protect it, and it wasn't a stranger who had access to our wedding album for 27 years. I picked up the phone and, with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else, typed back to the last message. This isn't M. This is Daniel. I need to know who you are. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then Emma and I sat in that kitchen and waited, the ceiling fan ticking overhead, both of us watching a screen that felt, suddenly, like a door we couldn't close again. The reply came 40 minutes later. Just 3 words. Not here. Wait. 2 days passed with nothing. I barely worked those 2 days. I run a small furniture restoration shop off Marymount Avenue, and I sat in the back room, sanding the same chair leg for 6 hours without noticing. On the 3rd day, a text came through with an address. A diner off Highway 25, 40 minutes outside town, in a stretch I didn't recognize. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Come alone, it read. I didn't come alone. Emma insisted, and I wasn't about to argue with my daughter about walking into the unknown by myself. We sat in a corner booth at 8:45, coffee going cold, watching every car that pulled in the gravel lot. At 9:04, a woman walked in. Early 60s, gray hair, cut short and practical, wearing a state park ranger jacket, even though it clearly wasn't a work day. She scanned a room once, found us, and walked over like she already knew exactly which booth was ours. You're Daniel, she said. It wasn't a question. I'm Margaret. Laura and I worked search and rescue training together years back before either of you knew me. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Is my wife alive? Margaret didn't answer right away. She slid into the booth across from us, folded her hands on the table, and looked at me with an expression I recognized, the look of someone who has been carrying a weight for a very long time and is finally about to set it down. Daniel, she said, I need you to listen to everything before you decide how you feel about it. Laura didn't drown in that lake. But what she did, she didn't do to hurt you. She did it because 3 weeks before that accident, a man named Carl Doss was released from prison, the same man who put her in the hospital in 1988, before she ever met you, back when she went by a different last name. The diner noise faded to nothing. Emma's hand found mine under the table and gripped it hard. He found out where she lived, Margaret said quietly, and Laura panicked. She thought disappearing was the only way to keep you and Emma safe. I need you to understand something about my wife before I tell you what happened after that. Long before I ever met her, in a life she rarely spoke about, Laura had been married once, briefly, at 22, to a man who beat her badly enough that she spent 9 days in a hospital in Charlotte. She left him, changed her legal name from Laura Doss back to her maiden name, moved 3 hours away, and never looked back, or so I believed. Carl Doss served over 30 years for an unrelated armed robbery that turned violent. When he was released in 2021, a parole officer, as a courtesy, notified anyone he'd previously harmed. Laura got that call on a Tuesday. By Thursday, she'd learned, through an old contact, that Carl had been asking around Asheville for a woman matching her description. She didn't tell me. Margaret explained that Laura was terrified I'd want to fight it head-on, go to the police, make it visible, and visible to Laura meant dangerous. She'd seen what Carl was capable of when he felt cornered. So she built an exit. With Margaret's help, Margaret, who had law enforcement contacts through her park ranger work and who owed Laura a debt from years earlier when Laura had quietly helped Margaret leave her own bad marriage. Laura staged the boating accident. She swam nearly a mile downriver in the dark to a spot Margaret had scouted, where a car was waiting. She'd been living 40 minutes away in a small rented house near Chimney Rock, under yet another name, working online bookkeeping jobs, watching our family from just far enough away to stay safe, and just close enough to still feel like she was part of us. The burner phone in the wedding album wasn't a secret affair. It was Laura's lifeline to Margaret, hidden in the one object she knew I'd never throw away. Emma was crying quietly beside me. Is she safe now? Is she okay? Carl Doss died of a heart attack 8 months ago, Margaret said. Laura's known for 6 months. She's been trying to find the courage to come back ever since, and terrified of exactly this. That you'd hate her for it. If you stayed with me this far, thank you, because I know the next part is the part everyone's been waiting for, and I'm not going to rush it, because I didn't get to rush it in real life either. Margaret gave me an address. Not a phone number, not a text. An actual address, a small house on a gravel road outside Chimney Rock, because Laura had told her that if this day ever came, she wanted to say what she needed to say face to face, not through a screen. I drove there alone. Emma wanted to come, but something told me this first conversation needed to happen without an audience, even one who loved us both. The house was small, tidy, with a wind chime on the porch that I recognized. It was one we'd bought together on our honeymoon in the Outer Banks, 27 years earlier, one I hadn't seen since it went missing from our own porch the month before she died. She opened the door before I even knocked. 3 years older, grayer, thinner in the face. Her eyes were exactly the same. "Daniel," she said, and her voice broke on the second syllable of my name. I stood on that porch for a long moment, feeling every version of anger and relief and grief crash into each other at once. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "Did you ever, for one single day, think about just telling me the truth and letting me decide how to protect you?" Laura's hands were shaking. "Every day," she said. "Every single day for 3 years. But you would have fought him head on, Daniel. You would have gone to the police, made noise, made yourself a target, try to protect me. And I couldn't survive watching that happen because of me. I'd rather you hate a dead woman than bury a real one." It wasn't a clean answer. It wasn't the answer that made the last 3 years of grief disappear. But standing there, I finally understood. She hadn't vanished because she stopped loving us. She vanished because, in her own broken logic, love meant disappearing. I didn't hug her that day. I wasn't ready, but I didn't walk away either. The weeks that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Harder, in some ways, than the funeral itself, because grief has an ending and this didn't. This was learning to be married to someone I'd buried. Emma took it worse than I expected and better than I feared. She screamed at her mother the first time they spoke, then sobbed in her arms 20 minutes later, both things true at once. "You let me plan a funeral for you," Emma said. "You let me speak at it. You let me think I failed to notice you were hurting." Laura had no excuse that made that better. She didn't try to give one. She just said, over and over, I know, I'm sorry," until the words stopped sounding like an apology and started sounding like the truth. I made Laura tell me everything, start to finish, no gaps. The parole notification. The nights she sat in her car outside our old house just to watch our porch light turn on. The Christmas she stood in the parking lot of the church during our service in a hooded coat and watched us walk out afterward. She'd been closer than I ever imagined. The entire time, close enough to ache for a life she'd walked away from to save it. It would be easy to make Carl Doss the villain and leave it there, but Margaret told me something one afternoon that stuck with me. "People don't usually vanish because they're cruel," she said. "They vanish because somewhere along the way, someone taught them that love means sacrifice without asking, that protecting people means going alone." I started to see Laura differently after that. Not as someone who betrayed me, but as someone still, decades later, running from a 22-year-old version of herself who never had anyone to run to. She made the wrong choice, but it wasn't a selfish one. It was a scared one. We started seeing a counselor together, twice a week, in a small office above a bakery on Biltmore Avenue. Some sessions I left angrier than I walked in. Others, I left holding her hand in the parking lot for the first time in over 3 years. 6 months passed before Laura moved back into the house on Sycamore Street. We didn't rush it, and honestly, I'm grateful we didn't, because the version of our marriage we're rebuilding now is more honest than the one we had before, even with everything it cost to get here. Emma struggled longer than either of us. There's a particular kind of anger that comes from grieving someone who was never actually gone, and she was entitled to every bit of hers. What helped, eventually, was Laura simply showing up. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, never defensive, never asking to be forgiven faster than Emma was ready to forgive. We had the wedding album reframed. Not the same one, we bought a new album, And inside the front cover, in the space where that burner phone once hid in silence, Laura wrote a letter to Emma and me by hand, explaining everything in her own words, so it would never again live inside a lie. Margaret became something like family to us. She was there the night Laura finally told the whole story to Emma's fiancé. Yes, Emma is engaged now, to a man named Tom she met 8 months after her mother died, a chapter of grief Laura missed entirely and has spent every month since trying gently to be part of. There's a photograph on our mantle now, taken last spring, of the 3 of us, Daniel, Laura, Emma, standing in front of that same blue house on Sycamore Street. Nobody's smile in that photo is perfect. There's still visible strain in it if you look closely. But we're standing together, and after 3 years of standing at a grave that held nothing but an empty casket, that photograph means more to me than any wedding portrait ever could. If someone you love has ever done something you couldn't understand in the moment, I hope you'll consider, like I had to, that the wrong choice and the unloving choice aren't always the same thing. People ask me sometimes if I'm angry that it took a torn piece of silk lining for the truth to come out at all. If Laura ever would have told me, had that phone battery not still had 1 bar of charge left in it after 3 years in a closet? I've asked myself that question more nights than I can count. I don't fully know the answer. What I do know is that fear kept my wife silent for 3 years, and it very nearly kept her silent forever. I think about that a lot. How close we came to never finding that phone, to Emma eventually clearing out that closet after I was gone someday, finding it and never having anyone left alive to ask. Secrets don't stay buried because they're strong. They stay buried because the people who could dig them up don't yet know where to look. Ours happened to be hidden somewhere I loved too much to ever throw away. Laura and I renewed our vows this past October, quietly, just the 2 of us and Emma and Margaret, on the same dock where the accident was staged 3 years earlier. It felt important to stand in that exact spot and choose each other again, on purpose, with nothing hidden between us this time. If you made it this far with me, I'd really love to know. In the comments, tell me what you would have done in my place, standing in that closet with a phone that shouldn't exist. Would you have confronted her the way I did? Or would you have needed time first? I read every single comment, and this one, more than most I've told you, I genuinely want to hear how it lands with you. We don't get many second chances at a whole marriage. I almost buried mine over a lie born out of fear instead of malice, and I'm still learning every single day what it means to have gotten it back. I think about that wedding album a lot these days. Not the phone anymore, but the album itself. 27 years of photographs. And for 3 of those years, it had been quietly holding the most important secret of our entire marriage against its spine, waiting for someone to feel that one small, hard edge under the silk. Laura still keeps the original burner phone. It doesn't turn on anymore. The battery finally died for good about a month after that first message, but she keeps it in a drawer by our bed. Not hidden this time, just there, a reminder of how close fear came to costing her everything she was trying so hard to protect. Emma got married last month to Tom in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside Hendersonville. Laura walked her down half the aisle with me, something we both quietly agreed mattered more than either of us said out loud. Watching my wife, my actual, alive, imperfect, still healing wife, stand beside our daughter on her wedding day is a moment I genuinely believed I would never get to have again. If there's one thing I want you to carry away from our story, it's this. The people we love sometimes make choices out of terror that look, from the outside, exactly like betrayal. It doesn't excuse the pain those choices cause. It doesn't erase the years we lost. But it's worth asking the question before you close the door for good. Not how could you, but what were you so afraid of? That question saved my marriage. I hope, if you ever find yourself holding something you don't understand, you'll give yourself the chance to ask it too. If this story moved you the way it moved me to live it, consider staying close. Subscribe if you want more stories like ours, the messy, real, second chance kind. And I'd genuinely love to hear from you below. Has a secret ever changed how you understood someone you loved? Tell me about it. I read every one. Thank you for sitting with our story today. I'll see you in the next one.